smooth muscle and cartilage and glands in the lamina propria. All right, so the conducting portion is going to include all of those structures, and the respiratory portion is going to include when we start talking about respiratory bronchioles and alveolar ducts and alveoli. Okay, so when you're looking at a slide, you're going to have to look around and pick up the features. The epithelium, because respiratory epithelium is prominent, it's not going to be the only thing that's going to help you, and sometimes it's not even going to clue you into anything except for the fact that you're in the respiratory system, period. So don't forget that you are also having to identify other structures that are there. I'm not going to let you off the hook for identifying blood vessels and nerves and glands. Cartilage, bone, and muscles. So those are all going to be players in this system, and a lot of the slides will have all of those things on it. Okay, so the nasopharynx is going to have respiratory epithelium and looks very much like other places in the where the nasal cavity is and lower down. But it does have a special region where you have the pharyngeal tonsil, where you're going to see big aggregations of lymphocytes underneath the respiratory epithelium. And so that's what you're looking at here. And Dr. Glover will talk to you about the cells. I think she's actually talking to you about them tomorrow. And I'm going to get you down that path because your immunology block is starting. All right, the larynx, hopefully you haven't completely forgotten that the larynx is made up of a bunch of cartridges and also has overlying muscle. And so hopefully you haven't forgotten that. Also, just anterior to the muscles and cartilages of the larynx, that's where the thyroid gland is going to sit. And it has a lot of glands that you couldn't see before in the lamina propria, but you're going to see now. If it's cut mid-sagittally, it definitely looks different because this is cut in half, and so you're looking at this is superior, this is inferior. And this is towards the inside of the larynx, and this is on the outside. And so you can see the fold. This is the vestibular fold, and here is the vocal fold here from a distance. And you'll be able to zoom in and identify not only the epithelial transitioning that occurs, but muscles, cartilage, and a little bit of the cartilage has actually ossified in this individual. Okay. It looks very different in a cross section. So here you can see the cartilages, and you can see lots and lots of glands here. I can see from this magnification that we have some glands and loose connective tissue in places, and we have muscles in other places. So that's what you can see, and we'll be able to zoom in. I have them labeled here: cartilages, epithelium. There's a thyroid gland. I said glands. And then we can have different muscles, and we will see other glands as well. Really cool thing is that the larynx, you're going to see not only respiratory epithelium, but you're going to see a transition to the stratified squamous epithelium over the true vocal fold and also over the epiglottis. And so we get a little more friction in those areas, and we want to protect those structures from the constant abrasion of fast-moving air. And so that's why we have the transition to stratified squamous. And this is just a little bit of exactly what I just said. Okay, and this is a close-up picture of a larynx where over the true vocal fold where you have stratified squamous non-keratinized, and this is the same larynx but respiratory epithelium where you can see prominent goblet cells. Even if you can't really see the cells close up, the goblet cells are telling you one of two things: you're either in the respiratory tract or you're in the digestive tract. Okay, and you'll learn later that these cells are not columnar enough. A simple columnar is the digestive tract, and so this is the stratified or pseudostratified. All right, the trachea. The trachea has some prominent features that really stick out. It's got this nice big C cartilage ring that you can see that kind of clues you in that you're in the trachea. So it's an actual tube that's cut and on the slide instead of that funky looking larynx, and so that kind of helps. All right, if we get in closer, we can see that this structure has respiratory epithelium here. And then it has a lot of glands in the lamina propria. So they're really much more pronounced than any other place in the respiratory system. And then if you have a low power view, being able to see the C-shaped cartilage really helps. give you an indication that you're in the trachea even before you confirm it by looking at the other features. There is an adventitia around the whole organ, and then the trachealis muscle, which is really not depicted well because it's not cut right through the trachealis muscle in this slide, but I have it on the next one. But there is also an extension of the perichondrium that is going to be fibroelastic and is going to go from one side to the other of the cartilage that helps gives the trachea rigidity and strength. Here is another picture where you can see the trachea and you can see the trachealis muscle going from one side to the other. And it's just next to the esophagus, adnexa. All right, so this is the trachea in the Michigan slide, and so you get to see the bright blue basement membrane because it's full of collagen. And you can see prominent goblet cells in this stain, so this is something that you'll see in lab. The next structure is the bronchi. Bronchi can be primary, so it could be outside of the lung, but most of the bronchi that you're going to see histologically are going to be intrapulmonary bronchi, so within lung tissue. And so you'll see lung tissue, and then you have to sort out where the bronchi are positioned relative to the other structures. The bronchi are going to have respiratory epithelium, and it's going to have cartilage, but the cartilage are not going to be big and C-shaped like the cartilage was in the trachea, but rather it's going to be smaller plates of cartilage, and as smaller the bronchi get, smaller the plates of cartilage get. And there are still some seromucous glands in the submucosal area, and so you will be able to see an occasional bundle of glands, and you'll be able to see some cartilage, and then we start to see smooth muscle that shows up in the lamina propria as well. So the lamina propria is what is thinner than in the trachea. It's not going to have as many glands, but it is going to still have cartilage in it. All right. And then you'll see the lung around it and sometimes some lymphatic tissue. So in this slide, here's a bronchi here, bronchus here, and it's not primary because it's within the lung, so it has to be at least secondary. And then here you can see a smaller bronchus, maybe that's a tertiary, not sure. And then you can see a vessel here, and you can see what's probably a vessel here. I don't see any cartilage in the walls of this, and I can't see it close enough to know, but I think it's a vessel. This has got red blood cells inside. Usually the arteries run along with the air spaces, and the veins run along kind of a little farther off inside the lung parenchyma. But this could be cut obliquely. All right, if you get a closer view of the bronchus, or the wall of the bronchus, I can see the epithelium here. So this is nowhere near as thick as the respiratory epithelium was in the other parts of the more upper respiratory system. This is definitely starting to get shorter in its height. And then for the first time, you get to see smooth muscle here. It's a pretty decent band of smooth muscle that shows up, and constriction of the smooth muscle is going to cause narrowing of the airway. And then here you can see this really nicely stained cartilage. You're going to need to identify cartilage in this block here. You're not going to necessarily know all of the little types of cartilage. You just have to recognize it as cartilage because Dr. Gregory is going to talk about the skeletal tissues when she does bone. Okay, and then here you can start to see some alveolar spaces, and you can see they are abutting the wall of the bronchus. Here you can see the epithelium closer up. They still have cilia on them. They're nowhere near the stratified nature as the previous epithelium that we had seen in the respiratory system. So don't forget the lung is segmented into primary, secondary, and tertiary, and this is just degrees of branching. So you have one on each lung of primary, and then they're going to branch, and they're going to serve, when they're secondary bronchi, they're going to serve as one to each lobe, and then when they branch another time, they are going to serve all individual bronchopulmonary segments, and those are the tertiary bronchi. So they all have the same characteristics that we just discussed. It's just that they're going to be progressively smaller. And so this is going to be a bronchus. I only need to know that it has cartilage here in the wall. These look like they could be little pieces of parts of glands, and so that those two things together, I can also see smooth muscle at this magnification, but I don't even have to look at the epithelium because I can see that I'm within the lung. I see cartilage, so right now I know I have to be in or looking at a bronchus. All right, and that's because the next level, which is a bronchiole, is deficient in any cartilage. It has no cartilage in the wall, and it has no glands in the submucosa. Okay, so that's what makes it a bronchiole: the absence of cartilage, the absence of glands, and this is a progressively smaller airway. And so here you can see a bronchiole within lung parenchyma. You can see two blood vessels depicted, 1 and 2. And here you can see a whole bunch of, there's some vessels kind of scattered in here, but generally speaking, there are a lot of alveoli. Now, the epithelium gets even shorter here, and it can even end up just being simple columnar in its appearance, okay? Here is another picture that shows you a longitudinal cut through a bronchiole. And so you can see the bronchiole ends. It ends in the bronchiole that they refer to as a terminal bronchiole, means the ending of the bronchiole, and it's going to open up into the first part of the respiratory portion of the respiratory system, which is a respiratory bronchiole. And I know that that is the case even from this magnification, because I can see that this part of I can see that this is a bronchiole and it's continuous, and then this part gets broken up and I can see it open into a couple alveolar spaces. Okay, and you're not gonna have goblet cells at this part of the respiratory system, so you are going to lose that clearing function that mucus was serving. However, you don't have you're also going to start losing those ciliated cells, so you're not going to have them to get mucus out of that area if it did have mucus. Because the epithelium is going to change from a ciliated columnar, mostly in nature, to a new cell called a club cell. A club cell, which was previously called Clara cells, they are dome-shaped, they don't have any cilia on them, and they make lots of secretory granules, so they're usually kind of paler in appearance. The cool thing is that they can divide and they can replace other cell types that are in the alveolar spaces called type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes. So they secrete surfactant components, and they also have enzymes, so they can detoxify noxious substances that have been inhaled and have gotten down into that part of the respiratory system. So you don't have goblet cells, you don't have cilia to remove particles by the escalator that gets the mucus out of the respiratory system, but these cells can actually help detoxify some substances, and they will also stimulate your immune response by releasing cytokines. All right, now the lamina propria that of a bronchiole has a lot more smooth muscle in ratio to the thickness of the wall. And so this smooth muscle is going to be autonomically innervated and under control of sympathetics and also the vagus nerve. And it's kind of counterintuitive maybe, but the sympathetic nervous system, stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system causes relaxation of the smooth muscle cells in the walls of the bronchioles. And that's because if you had a stress response and you needed to fight or fly, you would need more oxygen to your lungs to support you in your physical activity that was going to occur. And so it might be kind of counterintuitive, but so it's one of those things kind of like pupil dilation and constriction is. And so this is another location where it might not be the way that you would expect it to be. And as you'll learn in your physiology class, that this constriction that can occur from the smooth muscle cells in the wall contracting will increase airway resistance and will become, really problematic for the person who's trying to breathe air in and out of their lungs. And so Dr. Levitsky will talk to you more about that. All right. And so the respiratory bronchioles are going to be where you have a continuous terminal bronchiole start to break up and open into alveolar spaces. So at this point, this terminal bronchiole has become a respiratory bronchiole. And you still will see a couple scattered epithelial cells that look like club cells. And that's how you know it's not just an alveolar duct, because you still have a couple patches of these epithelium. And it's not super easy to find because of the way that these sections are cut, and they catch alveolar spaces and bronchioles and bronchi and all different kinds of orientations. So please be a little bit patient with yourself when you're trying to find this, okay? All right, and so the respiratory, this is from farther back. You can see there's still some club cells here and here. So in this area here where you have opening up into alveoli, you have a discontinuous bronchial epithelium into the alveolar epithelial cell types on the walls. This area here is a respiratory bronchiole, and that's the first part of the respiratory portion of the respiratory system. Okay, now for the main event, alveoli. It seems like you talk about alveoli so much in like the physiology class, and then when you get to histology, you talk so much about the respiratory system overall, and then only a little bit of time about alveoli. But that's okay. I want you to understand this conceptually so that you can really put everything together. So the alveolar air spaces have three parts to it. It has an epithelium, the surface epithelium. All right, so we have new cells to talk about that we haven't talked about yet. Then there is what's called a fibroelastic and interstitium. So Levitsky will talk a lot about it just being an interstitium, or interstitial spaces or walls. And so this is the supporting connective tissue that is amongst or just at sort of like the basement membrane, but it's extremely, extremely thin. It's really, in a lot of places, diffuse basal lamina. But it is going to still contribute to the structure and rigidity of the alveolar wall. So the walls of the alveoli is going to have some supporting connective tissue. And then all of these walls, I don't know if you can see from this magnification, but all of the little red circles, those are all red blood cells. So all of the walls are also made up of pulmonary capillaries. And they're going to be cut in all different orientations, which is going to be very, very maddening when you're looking at a histology slide. So this is one close up, and you can see the pulmonary capillaries sort of winding through. To me, I kind of feel like the pulmonary capillaries holding everything up, and I know they can't really be doing that, but I don't know, it just sort of always seems that way to me, because you only cut the epithelium in every once in a while in through a nucleus. But there is an epithelium, the cell membrane of the epithelial cells are lining all of the alveolar spaces, even if it doesn't look like that in a histology slide. So you're going to have the epithelial cells, you have the endothelial cell that is lining this pulmonary capillary, and then you have fibers, collagen, reticular, and elastic fibers that are also woven into this wall. That's collectively called the interstitium. Oh, okay. So it's kind of disappointing though to look at a real histology slide, but this is the reality of what we're dealing with. The lung is cut. It's like a honeycomb appearance, and it's a very, very 3D structure, and we're cutting it, and it's kind of shrunk down and collapsed, and so that's why it looks so abnormal. But you got to sort of use your imagination to kind of put it back into place so that you can figure out what you're looking at.